Top 10 Thomas and Friends episodes. That's cute. But have you ever thought of adding another 0 to that number? Hello friends, if you've been here before, welcome back, and if you're new here, welcome aboard. Well, it's been about 3 years now since I started my ranking videos for the classic era of Thomas, doing this for the first 7 series, but I think now is the time to challenge myself. In this video, I will go through, in my opinion, the top 100 episodes of Thomas's golden era. But now to answer the important question. When exactly was Thomas's golden era? In the past, I have said no question about it. Series 1 to 7 is when the show is in its prime. However, I'm going to change my opinion for today. On this occasion, I am only ranking the episodes from Series 1 to 5. Although I do feel that 6 and 7 deserve a place in the classic era, including them in a top 100 list would be A. controversial and B. difficult. While there are some gems from these 2 seasons that could definitely contend for the top 100, it would still be displacing a classic from 1 to 5, and I just can't bring myself to do that. Plus, it would mean I have 182 episodes to sort through, and I just think that's too much of a challenge. So the method for this was simple. Write down all 130 episodes, then eliminate 30 of them. We started with the obvious: Thomas's Train, Thomas on the Guard, Thomas in Trouble, Better Late Than Never, Wrong That Turn, Gordon the Gremlin, etc. All the duds, basically. Then keep eliminating dull or bad episodes until finally we got our top 100. The closest episode to making this list was Daisy. While her character is very clear to see and enjoyable, I still think her introduction is the only good part of this one, so it ranks 101st. Don't be too feeble about it, Daisy, better times are ahead. I'm going to try and get through the 100 as quickly as possible without rambling, but this could easily be my longest video yet, so get a snack, a drink, and enjoy. Number 100, Happy Ever After. A lovely and pleasant episode concept which I think even Audrey would have loved. However, not much of note happens, and compared to the action-packed episodes Series 5 is known for, this one seems more and more unremarkable. Number 99, Wrong Road. Another one that focuses primarily on amusing its audience. The scenes with Bill and Ben are funny, as well as the scene with the green hat, but this one confused me as a kid, and I imagine I'm not the only one. Number 98, Thomas and the Rumours. The message of this one is the best part for me. The big engine saying before thinking is really in character for them. Other than that, the crash is pretty forgettable, and it's another case of too much dialogue and not enough action. Number 97, Thomas and the Breakdown Train. If The Adventure Begins didn't exist and we got to see James's crash in that, this episode will be even higher. It's a good way to end Thomas's first arc, but to me, that's the only true standout moment. Number 96, James and the Express. After James's arc properly ended in the episode prior to this, this feels very much like a bonus episode where not much actually changes. The dialogue between Gordon and James takes up too much of the story, but the fact this one sets up James's obsession with the Express makes me rate it slightly higher. Number 95, Thomas and Gordon. 2 of the show's finest characters have their first feud, and it's a decent one at that, with a good runaway scene. However, due to the necessary introductions, this episode's a little slow in getting into gear, but it still feels wrong saying this shouldn't have been the show's first installment. Number 94, Thomas and Trucks. Best story out of what is a pretty mediocre Railway series book. The show's first encounter with trucks is a good introduction to them, and the runaway scene is always exciting. Number 93, Special Attraction. I really like the book these 2 stories feature in, but I don't think combining Toby's seaside holiday with Bulger was the best idea. Had this just been a word-for-word remake of Bulger, this would have been rated higher. Toby's part of the story was unnecessary though, so that's one huge negative. Number 92, Thomas and the Missing Christmas Tree. A very pleasant way to end Series 2 with a lovely Christmassy feel. However, the story is simple without much drama or urgency, when really this series should have gone out on a much higher note. Number 91, The Sad Story of Henry. Firstly, terrible name when you know parents have complained about this one. Written with lots of amusing, memorable moments, but sadly this was always going to be a quiet, uneventful episode. It's not only the sad story of Henry, it's the bland story of Henry. Number 90, Thomas, Percy and the Post Train. Best part, the nighttime montage. Everything else is pretty forgettable. Harold wanted to take the post train job, makes him too much of an antagonist, and the plot as a whole is the most basic you can come up with. Number 89, Oliver's Find. Oliver wanting a long run doesn't make much sense to me, and the way he gets it is quite odd. Bonus points for the night shots and the scenes flying in Harold, but I feel other Series 5 episodes were written way better with more effort. Number 88, Donald's Duck. Love when Doc is placed with the twins and he and Donald bounce off each other very well. There are a few too many montages that take up episode length, but the story is still pleasant with enough heart to make me remember it fondly. Number 87, Dirty Work. One of the best cliffhanger ending stories. Diesel's villainy is off the scale, and Doc's heartbreak feels so genuine. However, the too much talking virus strikes this episode as well, and the target audience shouldn't be left confused in mature episodes like this. Number 86, Diesel Does It Again. Although I think Diesel's slightly better in the previous episode, this is still another well-handled early Brenner episode with a good message on confronting your demons and saying when bullying is occurring. Number 85, Tender Engines. We're now into the half-good, half-bad region of stories. The banter with the edges is amusing as well as the ending, but pretty much everything that's not from the RWS version I tend to skip. Number 84, Paint Pots and Queens. Once you realise how to place this one is, the episode is pretty much ruined. While it does still give you that same sweet feeling the book version did, it still feels like a big mistake leaving it until Series 4. Number 83, Thomas and Stepney. First Thomas-centric episode of the season, and he's very poorly represented. Unfortunately, him hating the new character at first became a popular trope, so I don't regard this otherwise pleasant episode very highly. Number 82, Thomas and Percy's Christmas Adventure. Best Christmas episode of the classic era. That's something, I guess. The best part of this one is the wintry atmosphere, which is consistent throughout, but the story could have gone much, much further in my opinion. Number 81, Woolly Bear. Funny and memorable title, but the episode itself doesn't quite manage that. Could have more humour and less name calling between Thomas and Percy, but I guess that's just Series 2 being itself. Number 80, Thomas Comes to Breakfast. All kids remember it, but when the grown-ups notice the biggest flaw, you can't unsee it. Thomas was not to blame. It could have included a proper runaway sequence to make it just a little bit more memorable, but the weaknesses it already had probably wouldn't have convinced me to put it higher. Number 79, Edward and Gordon. Good idea to combine the first two stories, and by the end, these two iconic characters are properly developed, kicking off a very popular rivalry that only gets better each time we see it. A decent opening chapter though. Number 78, Trouble in the Shed. Great introduction to Percy. Other than that, the episode's very vanilla. After the cliffhanger of the last episode, I wanted a little bit more confrontation considering it's a literal strike. And once again, a lot of unnecessary dialogue. Number 77, Down the Mine. I'd have liked this one more if we'd seen the actual alliance take place afterwards. Great build up to Thomas's accident as well, but other than that, not the best penultimate episode for the pilot season. Number 76, Toby's Tightrope. The Runaway and Tightrope scenes are of course the most memorable and best parts, but both are over too quick for me. Partly thanks to the pre-accident dialogue. Again, less talking, more storytelling. Number 75, Double Teething Troubles. An okay portrayal of people with permanent illnesses that's treated with respect. It works to have Bill and Ben as the protagonists, but we could have got to know Derek a bit more at the same time. Number 74, Toby's Discovery. A decent way to introduce me to Season 5. Once again, the nighttime sequences and tension are perfect, but it still doesn't feel right to have Toby as the fearful one. Bertram is a pointless addition if you can even call him an addition, but the sense of atmosphere is always a big positive for me. Number 73, Mavis. I've really grown to love Mavis for her later development, and this is an enjoyable debut for her. Her and Toby bounce off each other very well, and although there could be more antics between them, I still prefer it over its follow-up story. Number 72, Horror Lorry. Having road vehicles as the antagonist is always a joy to watch. I could have done with more personality from the lorries, but seeing each of them get their comeuppance in funny and memorable ways is still great. Number 71, James and the Coaches. The two RWS stories featured are pretty run-of-the-mill, so this episode is a bit as well. They do work together, I will admit, and are good introductions to the character, but I could have done with more of the vain James we love to sit on the fence with. Number 70, Cows. The biggest strength is seeing Edward get the last laugh when the big edges have to deal with a cow on the line. I also like the montages of the edges going about their day across the line. Other than that, it's just a decent one-off that doesn't tie into any future stories, and it's a bit out of place in Edward's book. Number 69, Home at Last. Best parts of this one are the return of Scarloey and the introduction of Duncan, and I'm glad both got equal amounts of attention. Once again, I could have done with less talking and exposition, but it's a nice chilled follow-up to what was a pretty bleak and somber episode before this. Number 68, Rock and Roll. This one and Home at Last are so similar I couldn't really keep them that far apart. Duncan and Rusty, however, are much more developed and I prefer the happier ending, so that's my reason for putting it ahead of Duncan's debut episode. Number 67, Percy's Predicament. Plenty more going on than in the previous instalments and a good way to resolve the Daisy introduction arc, even if there is a lot of mature dialogue towards the end. The Runaway sequence and crash stand out most of all though, hence its position. Number 66, Trust Thomas. Two high points for this one. Thomas's caring, generous side and the incident which gives me so much nostalgia. Although Bertie had been written better in the past, it's a good friendship story for them both. Number 65, Buzz Buzz. Memorable and humorous, but adequate in terms of story. Another of those fun series season 3 James episodes you shouldn't take too seriously. Shout out to the talents who made the B animation as well. Number 64, Snow. The episode title Snow sadly isn't the best one to actually feature snow. The avalanche is epic, but the episode's tone is really off at times. I'd have expected more drama and less, well, funny parts. Number 63, By George. I wish we didn't have to say bye to George, but this is still a brilliant final curtain. The two epic crashes are the highlights, but I could have done a bit more story and argument. Number 62, The Runaway. The stuff with the handbrake confused me as a tot, and so I always wait until the runaway scene itself. The opening with Duck is nice and pleasant, but there's a little too much build up to the main part of the episode. Number 61, You Can't Win. The banter between Duke and the Scallywags is always amusing to watch, and it's definitely at its best here. Better than Time for Trouble, which is a similar concept, but I'd have wanted a better final Duke episode. Number 60, Bullseyes. I always remember the book of this one, even though I had to wait a while to see the episode. Nostalgia is a strong aspect to an episode, as is humour and character development, and Bullseyes has all three. Number 59, A Scarf for Percy. A good debut for Angelus, and an equally good way to extend what was a fairly short RWS story. The crash and wintry atmosphere also deserve a mention. Better would have blown minds in 1991. Number 58, Duck Takes Charge. This episode would be much lower if it was just dialogue, but it's such a good first story for Duck, I can't bring myself to put it low. Audrey and the series producers clearly love this character from the off. Number 57, Train Stops Play. You know by now I love a good chase sequence, and this one is okay. A bit nonsensical, I know, and if people found Caroline annoying, I'd understand. I remember it fondly though, and it suits Stepney well in my book. Number 56, Edward, Gordon and Henry. Possibly the franchise's most important story. Three unlikely friends are united and manage to complete each other's character arcs in a good, pleasant way, with plenty of amusing moments too. Number 55, The Diseasel. Although I could have done with more introduction for Boko, he's not the main focus. That goes to Bill and Ben, who managed to catch their truck stealer in the most bonkers Bill and Ben way possible. An excellent debut for them. Number 54, Tennis and Turntables. Take this episode seriously and you'll never enjoy it as much. Good fun and games until the final scene, which I still think is the best cliffhanger in Thomas. The follow-up might not have been the best, but the end of this one still left us craving to see it. Number 53, James and the Trouble with Trees. A very typical James episode until his altercation with a tree. With that Series 5 magic, the stakes of the episode go from 0 to 50, making this a rare treat where James gets his just desserts in way more dramatic fashion than we're used to. Number 52, Four Little Engines. Possibly the best Scholarly episode, but I wouldn't call it the best narrow gauge episode. Personally, I'd have preferred Scholarly Remembers and Old Faithful as separate episodes. Together though, it's just an okay run-of-the-mill episode. Number 51, A Surprise for Percy. Again, nostalgia sticks out like a sore thumb, and I always looked forward to this one as a kid. Not the best Runaway sequence ever, but it suits the moody Percy we had in Series 5. Underrated in my view. Number 50, Thomas and the Special Letter. The original RWS story was hardly a spectacular one, so the episode wasn't really meant to be one either. However, it was still a really good choice having it for the 100th episode, and it does give you a warm, pleasant feeling the book failed to. Number 49, Gordon and the Famous Visitor. Another decent, memorable Gordon misfortune story. The image of Gordon losing his dome always sticks in my mind more so than the rest of the episode. I personally would have preferred the original name of Domeless Engines also. Number 48, Percy and the Signal. Like the Famous Visitor, this episode features one memorable scene, but a lot of talking for the rest. I always look forward to the Signal scene more, but it's still a ton of fun in other places. Number 47, Cole. After quite a few happy, positive episodes, the depressing parts of this one must have taken people by surprise. Very satisfying way to bring a smile back to Henry's face and temporarily return him to service. Of course, temporarily being the operative word. You know what's coming up. Number 46, Something in the Air. Not the most intense, dramatic Season 5 story, but every night-themed episode gets a thumbs up from me. The build-up to Henry's crash is as good as his interaction with Thomas, but it's one that most people put in the middle of their Season 5 list. Number 45, Pop Goes the Diesel. Considering how ugly this rivalry will go on to become, I could have done with a bit more hints to the drama that was to come. However, this is still a fun classic with good dialogue between our two mates and an amusingly embarrassing moment for the newbie. Number 44, A Better View for Gordon. This episode can include just the epic crash and the viewers will probably still love it. That's how standout the moment is. Everything before and after is rarely talked about, but the boasting, the complaining, the pride, it's vintage Gordon and we'll remember this one forever. Number 43, Put Upon Percy. Another of those stories that takes its time to get into gear. Like a surprise 4, it suits the moody Percy of this era. The best part is of course the mind's collapse, and if the whole episode focused on that, it would be way higher than 43rd. Number 42, Off the Rails. A lot of these Gordon Misfortune episodes are pretty close to each other, aren't they? But this one's unique for doing that first and showing that Gordon is human. Well, not human, but you know what I mean. The incident is funny and it's easy to see that something changes inside Gordon when it happens. Number 41, Rusty to the Rescue. If you were to tell me they should have made Bluebells of England as opposed to this for historical accuracy, I'd have to ask you to leave the room. We don't watch Thomas just for realism. We watch it for adventure, and an exciting and intriguing mission like this is exactly what we look for. Number 40, Henry and the Elephant. If this was made in Series 1, I'm sure more people would have liked it. However, this is still a good recreation of the book while also adding some extra pleasant moments that Season 4 loved to do. Number 39, Gallant Old Engine. Possibly Renee's only true good episode with excitement and high stakes. It's a good way to bring him back and help the audience learn more about him, and a nice way to include the narrow gauge half of the season. Number 38, Bulgy. The first ever road vehicle villain and certainly one of the best. It's a really good Duck and Oliver episode also, with well written dialogue and a very funny just desserts for the mean Scarlet Deceiver. God, I love saying that. Number 37, Bulldog. Easily Duke's second best episode and a good debut for Falcon / The Handle. The accident is well filmed, as is the build up and rescue, and it's nice to see Duke show bravery for a change as opposed to the wisdom he's become known for. Number 36, Percy and Harold. An episode that's grown on me quite a lot over the years. It's an excellent introduction to Harold and the rivalry between himself and Percy, and of course, there's a race in this one, which always gets extra points from yours truly. Number 35, Steamroller. So how do I George put together in an episode with champagne characterizing? Two outspoken characters at loggerheads with each other is so entertaining, and this is a rivalry I'd love to have seen done again, but once is more than enough. Number 34, Stepney Gets Lost. One last adventure for the lovable Stepney, and a very intense and fitting one as well. The bright, happy moments in the quarry are instantly replaced with the dark, mysterious night scenes, and to add to the drama we almost see Stepney's life end with our own eyes. It's that close to being too dark for kids, and I love it. Number 33, Oliver Owns Up. I do prefer the original title from the book, but apart from that, it's an improvement over resource and sagacity. The accident is memorable and well built up, and Oliver's various emotions would surely have won him some fans after only a tiny hint of development in Escape. Number 32, Dirty Objects. While it's a fairly standard James humiliation episode, the dialogue between him and Toby is a good addition, and it works well for one of Toby's first episodes as we get to see his wittiness and wisdom begin to show. The crash and runaway sequence are really well made too, especially for a Season 1 version. Number 31, Percy Runs Away. Did I just imply that Season 1 runaway sequences aren't usually that well made? Well, it's certainly not the case for this one. The theme is used for the very first time and we get a whole minute to enjoy it. It's a fairly plotless episode if you were reading the book, but the techniques and angles give this one a huge advantage in the filming department. Number 30, Bertie's Chase. Potentially the only classic episode where Bertie has more than one emotion. His impatient, determined manner is really enjoyable, the locations are eye-catching, and overall, it's just another good, fast-paced chase episode that I wish we had more of with Bertie. Number 29, Percy's Promise. Another story that looked great when brought to life while still using that Railway series inspiration. The rain and flood effects look fantastic, and even though it's odd to have this in Series 3, it would have looked nowhere near as good if it was made before Percy's Plunge. Speaking of which, number 28, Percy Takes the Plunge. Both of the Percy Ends Up in the Water episodes are equally very good, but the build-up, tension and nostalgia just edge this one over Promise. It suits Percy's predominant Series 2 attitude while including a good antagonist in Henry. Number 27, Trucks. An interesting idea to have an unrelated major crash happen in an introductory episode. Everyone feels in character in this one, especially Sir Handel, Peter, Sam and Harold. The crash is well made, and a lot of it just feels right for Rusty's debut. Number 26, Bowled Out. Another episode that suits Stepney to a T. Duck and Class 40 are also great main characters, even though everyone plays a little part in the end. We get good interactions, funny moments, and a memorable race against time to conclude. Number 25, Thomas and Bertie. The first episode I ever saw just sneaks its way into my top 25. An unlikely friendship is formed along with an exciting, well-filmed race across the entire branch line, ending the group of Thomas episodes on an enjoyable note. Number 24, Troublesome Trucks. James finds his place on Sodor by showing a side to him we don't often get to see, his never give up attitude. The trucks also use this attitude very well, and the unusual, memorable incident almost makes them win, but either way, they more than earn their place in the episode title. Number 23, Whistles and Sneezes. For me, these episodes are like chicken and mushroom, two fine flavours that work well together. Two humorous, enjoyable stories combined to make a 5-minute romp that will make children laugh and parents chuckle. Number 22, Brake Van. Maybe it wasn't such a bad thing Missing Coach wasn't the twins' debut. We get to see both of them grow as characters with their humorous side, their dedicated side, and their vicious side. The title character is another excellent villain whose demise is just as spectacular as his presence in the story. Number 21, Special Funnel. Most people regard this one highly for its visual story, but it's not quite a top 20 one for me. While the gorgeous wintry atmosphere is most certainly the best part, I could have done with a lot more plot than just Peter Sam's new funnel. Number 20, Toby and the Stout Gentleman. Undoubtedly one of the best season 1 episodes where you just can't help but take in all the gorgeous locations, and the story is equally beautiful, successfully establishing Toby and his tragic past before his arrival on Sodor. Number 19, Heroes. While Act 1 is fairly ordinary for Bill and Ben, the second act with the hugely dramatic rock slide is the part that gets most people talking. It's one of the few mature and subtle Series 3 moments, making Heroes a standout episode from a mostly straightforward season. Number 18, Lady Hat's Birthday Party. Considering how much of a comic relief Tom has become, I guess we have this episode to thank for that. We get a welcome break from any drama or disaster, and just follow a dedicated husband suffer misfortune after misfortune. Number 17, All at Sea. Number 17 might seem low to you guys, but trust me, I love this one no less than you. It's a perfect Doc episode with a relaxed atmosphere, good character interactions, little moments of fast pace, and one of the series' most beautiful messages. Number 16, A Close Shave. Even though it could have ended the Diesel storyline better, this has an excellent chase sequence with build-up, excitement, and a memorable conclusion, capping off a very satisfying trilogy for our great Western friend. Number 15, Cranky Bugs. This was so close to being the best season opener of all time. Everything great about Season 5 is in this story. Great character dialogue, great filming techniques, and an added spice of drama. Oh, that and it introduces Cranky, one of the best and most consistent characters not created by Audrey. So there's that. Number 14, Toad Stands By. I'd say this was worth the 3-year wait. My second favourite character has a brilliant first speaking role with a really dark plan when you sit down and think about it. The crowning moment is of course Ruffy's unforgettable terror, making this a memorable one-off villain and episode in general. Number 13, Ghost Train. The first episode to include that stupendous spooky element, and it's one heck of a way to start. It has a great eerie atmosphere while still managing to stick to that mostly gentle way of writing for Series 2, with good interactions between the 3 branch line friends, a dark but not out of place story. Number 12, Duncan Gets Spooked. Now for one of the later dark episodes. I prefer this one over Ghost Train because of what they show and also what they don't show. The truth about the engine is never explained, and even though the flashback itself looks shocking, the lack of explanation is definitely the most shocking part. Number 11, Busy Going Backwards. Talk about a runaway success. The idea of Toad being the leader of a runaway train is both genius in writing and execution, with fantastic music, development, and of course the runaway sequences. It's no longer my favourite from Series 5, but the nostalgia I get from it makes all the difference. Number 10, Henry's Forest. Look, just because Audrey created this franchise and is the reason we are speaking now, doesn't mean I have to agree with every single one of his opinions. When you've got David Mitton directing the show, an episode like this should always exist. One where you can just sit back and take in these gorgeous sets. It's also a wonderful first episode for the sensitive version of Henry, showing a side to the character we'd see a lot more of in the years ahead. Number 9, Hoarded Henry. Probably going to get some flack for putting this above Duncan Gets Spooked, but this one has the advantage of actually putting me on edge. The tone and atmosphere is 100% consistent even during the daytime scenes. The music sounds the closest it's ever been to proper horror themes, and the fact we get a dramatic episode as well as a spooky one, the two elements that Series 5 absolutely excelled at. Number 8. Old Iron. The duo of Edward and James has been done surprisingly often, but in this story they bounce off each other better than in any of the others, and the episode as a whole suits the two better. Oh, and then there's that chase sequence. Have I said how exciting and epic it is in the past? Probably. Yes, I've said this is my favourite episode of all time, but favourite does not equal best. There are just 7 other episodes I consider slightly closer to being the best. Number 7. Fish. Thank you, Unlucky Tug, for opening everyone's eyes to this masterpiece. I agree with everything he mentions in his MTAX video, that real life feeling, that gorgeous nighttime atmosphere, and the dramatic crash and ending. Easily the best story written by Christopher and later brought to life on screen. Number 6. Rusty and the Boulder. This came incredibly close to being the most dramatic episode of all time, but this deserves extra points for how uneasy it makes us all feel. You can guess what will happen pretty much from the opening shot, and then there's the wait for Boulder to fall, and let me tell you, it's worth the wait. The chaos and drama is just mind-blowing, and a clear example of how far the filmography has come in the 14 years the show has been around for. Number 5. Escape. My opinion for this one has changed a lot over the years, but as of now it is a favourite from Series 3. We get an iconic adventure giving one fan favourite their defining moments, and another fan favourite a unique introduction. It's easy to see why so many people consider this the best episode of the cruelly underrated 3rd season. Number 4. Toby and the Flood. Toby's best episode is almost his last. I mean, that would only happen in season 5. This disaster movie, I'm going to call it, has all the elements that made Thomas more than just a kids show. That real life feel, drama, tension, and an outstanding soundtrack that can only be found here. I remember this one so vividly as a tot, and I'll probably remember it and be inspired by it for as long as I live. Number 3. Grab Buff. This is not only the beginning of Series 4, it has a new era feel about it as well. It's a beautiful way to introduce the equally beautiful narrow gauge railways as we meet 3 standout characters in a pleasant slice of life story. The ending, however, is what gets pretty much everyone talking, and I just wish I'd been old enough to experience the emotions felt by most. This mature story has become one of the show's most iconic, and it kicks off a glorious season that is still loved by the fandom today. Number 2. Edward's Exploit. More like Edward's defining moment. While not quite able to capture the desperate state Edward ends up in that almost prevents him from reaching home, it still manages to show how high the stakes are, and how much of a triumphant moment it is for the character when he just manages to complete his mission. Any other engine of Edward's age might not have even tried to succeed, but this shows that our beloved Edward the Blue Engine will always be a defier of the odds, and prove that age is just a number, and you're as young as you feel. A sensational episode. Number 1. The Flying Kipper. From what I've heard, people consider either this or Edward's Exploit the greatest of all time. But the reason I went with the former is because of how much I can relate to it. After all the suffering, pain and disappointments Henry went through before that winter morning, some people might decide that's how their life will go and give up. But no matter what the situation, no matter what the odds, your moments will come, so have hope and be strong. The plot for this could be one of the most basic of all time, and when it was just a book I imagine people didn't regard it as a story that was that spectacular, but the way it was brought to life by the geniuses building the sets and working the models, it feels like a big screen movie from beginning to end. This single episode was the magnum opus of Series 1. It showed that Thomas the Tank Engine was here to stay, and it has many wonderful years ahead. Wow, you made it to the end? Or just skipped to the top 10. Either way, I'm honoured. While I could have made this a much shorter video and just mentioned the best of the best, I think doing that doesn't quite capture how much of a mostly flawless piece of television Thomas the Tank Engine is. I could shorten this video down to 25 or a top 10, but there are so many adventures worth mentioning that I thought it was worth the challenge of 100. But don't let my rankings influence your choice, put any of them on, there are much worse things you could spend 12.5 hours doing. They will outlast the disappointing stories we've had for most of the new millennium, and we should never forget that. As long as we remember the great parts of Thomas' existence, it will stand the test of time. With all that said and done, it's your turn now. If you had to put together a top 100 list for classic era episodes, what would it look like? Would you include season 6 and 7 like I almost did? Would you base it on best or favourite episodes? Let me know in the comments. This was a video that took a heck of a long time to put together, so if you managed to sit through the whole thing, thank you. Until next time, cheerio!